Hey everyone, welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to be making strawberry rhubarb sauce. So I got on sale half a flat of organic strawberries. So I have 4 packages of strawberries. The reason they were on sale is because they're right at ready, even like over right here. So they need to be used right away. And then I got the last of the rhubarb out of the garden. That's my plan. So I'm going to make, I can't even say it's jam because there's no pectin or added sugar. It's going to literally be 2 ingredients, which is going to be the strawberries and the rhubarb. First thing we're going to do is wash everything. For the rhubarb, it's mostly just to get the dirt and possibly some bugs off. Now these containers that I've just emptied into the sink, I can wash and reuse for my own produce. While I'm washing strawberries, I'm going to core them. I got this cool little core thingy. I have washed everything, cored all the strawberries with all my tools. I am a firm believer in work smarter, not harder. Washing these has killed my back, and I feel like crap today to begin with. But I know that if I don't get this done today, these strawberries are going to go bad and I'm going to have to throw them out, and that's just not in the budget. Nor is that very good for the environment. So to make my life easier, I have moved to the other side of the island, which luckily this house has a seating area, so I can sit in this chair, this lovely little chair, and put my legs under the counter so that I'm up nice and close to my work area. It's a good height. And I'm going to chop everything up and put it in the pot, which I have a tiny bit of filtered water in the bottom, just so that it doesn't burn when I first put it on the burner. But if I don't do this sitting down, I'm not going to be able to finish my task. So for anyone who struggles, get a chair or a stool and use that in your kitchen. Trust me, it helps. Anyways, smaller pieces break up faster and it boils down faster. Being that my back is just screaming at me right now, I probably won't be chopping these as small as I should, but I'm just gonna chop strawberries and rhubarb now and hope for the best. Okay, so I got my pot of strawberry and rhubarb, and that's gonna go on the stove, medium-high heat. I got my canning spoon. I keep it with the canning stuff because I have dyed it purple just by stirring if I'm gonna can. So I just keep it separate so I don't stain all the spoons. And we'll just make sure we stir this as it warms up so nothing burns, and that'll boil down. And while that's boiling down, we will get our canning stuff together. I grabbed 12 of the approximately half cup jars. Second pot. box of lids and 12 bands. I'm hoping that will be plenty. The reason I chose the smaller ones is because we don't eat a lot of bread. So if I open a jar for using it on toast, if I open a big jar, it'll go bad before I use it all. So I do the small jars. And then, because it's going to be a sauce and not a jam, it's more versatile. You can use it like on top of pretty much anything. My brother has done it on top of meat, ice cream if you can have some sort of frozen dessert. Works really well. Just let that boil down, and I will fill this with water, and when that gets closer, I will start sanitizing the jars, and I will do the same with the lids and bands in this pot. So that's boiling now. It's on medium heat. I might turn it down. Just gotta keep stirring it. Everything will break down and it'll become sauce. Then boil off the excess water until it gets to the consistency you want. My lids and bands are ready to go. My jars are ready to go. I just have to turn everything on. The reason I use the giant canning pot, even though like more than half of it isn't required, is because it's got more surface area, so I can fit more jars in it. And oh, I hit something with my stomach. Oh well. And the water needs to be about 1 inch over top of the jars. Well, at least 1 inch over top of the jars. And with this big one, with these small jars, it won't boil over. Like I said, work smarter, not harder. There's my chair so that I can sit here and stir that and make sure that it's not burning and it's getting down to the consistency I want. I'm assuming this will take a couple hours. Look at all that liquid. It's got to break down all these and then boil off quite a bit of that liquid. And I'm doing 12 jars, even though I probably don't need 12 jars, because I would rather have more jars prepared and not need them than to have to run a second batch through the canner, because you do have to sterilize the jars. You could boil them for about 20 minutes before you fill them, just to make sure that they're sterilized. You probably don't need to do that with the bands, but I do that anyways. Then everything's just all in one spot. It's all the same temperature, so things aren't going to explode. Because if your jars are cold and you put your hot jam or sauce or whatever the hell you're putting in there, your jars will explode. And then you have to cool this down enough that the jar won't explode to sanitize more jars. So I don't think I will have more than 6 cups worth of sauce, but I guess we'll see. So I'm gonna sit in my chair and work smarter, not harder. Once it's boiling, you don't have to constantly stir it, but it's a very good idea to hang out in the area and make sure you're stirring occasionally so nothing's sticking to the bottom. And that way you can also check your consistency and see how far along you are. That is so beautiful. And it's nice and thick. So I've had my jars and lids boiling for about 20 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and get started with the canning process. So there's just a tiny bit left in there. I made a mess. I always make a mess. Expect your stuff to get stained. So I have 3 jars that I didn't use. So I used 11 jars. And once that starts boiling, we can start the processing time. And 10 minutes. What you want is an inch above the jars for the water. So, no, I'm fogging up. These have measurements on them, and this taller one is an inch. So, if I go from the edge of the jar, there's an inch. This one's slightly under. So I will add a tiny bit more water, but I don't think we have to worry about it too much. So this is about what was left in there. Not quite half a jar, maybe about half a jar. I got an old lid that had been vacuum sealed before and put it on here, and these 3 new lids, I will, once they're dry, which will be very shortly here, I'm gonna put them back in the new lid box so that they can be used to seal, because if you reuse them, the chances of your stuff not sealing is higher. So generally use new ones, and then if you're not going to vacuum seal it, I use one that has already been used, and this will just go in the fridge. And the house smells wonderful, and my boyfriend came upstairs and was like, I'm going to go get ice cream so that I can put some of the strawberry rhubarb sauce on it. So that's what that's going to get used for. So our processing time is done. I'm going to turn off the oven and just take the lid off. And I'm going to let that calm the hell down before I do anything, so probably 5 to 10 minutes, and then I'll take the jars out. Okay, it's not boiling crazy hard anymore. It's sat for a while. So I'm going to take the jars out, and I'm going to set them out of the way. So not on this counter. Got the lovely jar holder, but don't rely on that. Take a towel and put it underneath the jar as you're moving it, because if it falls out of this, at least you'll still have something to hold it with. Okay, now we are going to leave these here undisturbed for the next 12 to 24 hours, and hopefully they all seal. So I've got the jars set aside. I've heard some very nice clicking noises coming from those jars, so some of them are sealing, which is great. I feel worse than I did this morning, of course, because I pushed way too hard and did the canning, but I also feel accomplished because I did the canning. Tomorrow is going to suck a lot, but I will be able to take the bands off and check the seals and put the jars in the pantry, and that's all I'm going to be able to do tomorrow. So I will be paying probably for a couple days for getting that done. Okay, so it has been over 12 hours, but under 24. 12 hours would have put me at 3 a.m. It's after 10 a.m. and it's tomorrow. So all the jars, the lids are down, which is good. If they weren't, you would feel it move and you could hear a click. And we don't want that. That means there's no seal. What we're gonna do now is take the bands off. We wanna take all of them off eventually. Once you take the band off, you wanna grab the jar by the lid, the little snap lid you have on, and pick it up. You don't have to go high. If it lets go, it's not sealed. I can pick up the entire jar just with the lid. It's sealed. It's sealed. Now, they might not seal. And if that happens, there's a couple things you can do, depending on why it didn't seal. Most commonly, it's a flaw either in the lid or the jar itself, and if that's the case, it won't seal, no matter how hard you try. A little chip on the jar can just screw everything up. You could try to get another lid. If it's the jar, it'll never seal. But there are two things. You can put it in the fridge for immediate use, or you can try to reprocess it in the bath counter. All sealed. Don't put the rings back on. Keep them off, keep them separate. There's two reasons for that. One is that, let's say it didn't quite process right and something starts growing in here. It's going to create a little bit of gas. If you leave the ring on, it can create a false seal and keep that in there. If you keep it off, if it breaks the seal because it's creating a little bit of gas, the lid will just fall off with a touch. And when that happens, you toss the contents of your jar because you can't eat that. It's just safer. And the second reason is because they rust on. These rings rust really easily. And I can't count how many times growing up I was told to get a jar of whatever, and we couldn't open it because the rings were rusted on. So take the rings off. This is where a lot of people will wipe down the outside of the jars. I don't care enough to do that. I'm just gonna make labels and put them on the lids. And the reason I put them on the lids instead of the jar is because for home use, I don't care how it looks. And I will constantly reuse these jars until they're no good anymore. Like if I crack them or something. And then if I can't get all the label off, it will show that the lid's been used. Reusing lids lowers the chance of a seal as well, although I have successfully reused lids. I just had to make sure that there was no damage on them, and you can damage them when you try to open it. It's actually quite common to damage them when you try to open it. I'm gonna go get labels. When you're labeling, make sure to do so clearly. Yeah, right now this might be my only sort of pink thing. And right now I might know this is strawberry rhubarb, but if I do strawberry or cherry or something else that kind of has a red color, I won't be able to tell them apart until I open it. Also, write the date. It doesn't really matter if it's the date you're putting it on the shelf or the date you actually processed it, which would be yesterday's date. Just make sure you label it with a date because you want to have the older stuff first. And I'm making this late in the season, like the end of rhubarb. If I chose to make another batch June next year, I probably won't have all of this gone. And I would need to know which one was made in last year and which one was made this year. And I would have to eat the last year's one first. So I'd make sure to label exactly what this is. So this will say strawberry rhubarb and it'll have a date on it. So there, what it is, strawberry rhubarb and the date with the year. And I will label all of them and then I'll put them in my shelf. Okay, everything is labeled, so I'm gonna take my rings and put them aside. I got my extended rings, my wide mouth rings are down here. These are my used lids. And then all my stuff will go in here. I will put my new stuff here. So it's never a good idea to stack your jars because, again, you can create a false seal. So I bought those metal shelves from IKEA, and depending on the shelf height, I can fit, like, if you look at the top of what's on the screen here, I can fit the half a cup and the 1 cup jars on it, and then where I have the strawberry rhubarb, I can only fit the half cup jars on it, but I can fit the 1 cup and the 2 cup, I think, jars underneath, and then I'm not creating false seals. Everything is visible, and my bigger jars can go on the shelves that don't have shelves, and then it's just safer and healthier for everyone.